By way of motivation, I'd like to just read this very short quote from the Buddha for us to contemplate. And it might make more sense by the end of the talk to some people. If one teaching is grasped and known, all my teachings will be in the palm of your hand. And what is this one teaching? It is altruism. So may we make that our motivation for learning about the teachings and our practice and our time here today, to be able to put ourselves aside, not always be so controlled by excessive self-concern, which is rather relentless, but to really turn our minds towards a mind state that sees others as more important than ourselves. So may we chip away at the things that get in the way of that. And may we take great joy in having this opportunity. So, in the book that we're going through, Don't Believe Everything You Think, we're on this, oops, excuse me, can you just hold on to that because I won't really need it. It's kind of a small table. We're on this verse where it says, when your mothers who've loved you since time without beginning are suffering, what use is your own happiness? Therefore, to free limitless beings, develop the altruistic intention. And that's this altruism that the Buddha was talking about. And this verse, although it's very short, it has tons in it. In this chapter, which is just like 2.5 pages long, she mentions this altruistic intention, and then she also mentions a method, how to develop this in your mind and in your heart. And there's 2 methods that we have, and in this one that's in this chapter, it's this one called 7-point cause and effect. And we'll go through that a little bit. But I think it's really more important that we first really know what bodhicitta is, this altruistic intention. It's really this wish to become a fully awakened Buddha, because it's many Buddhists believe that we have this potential, our Buddha nature, that we actually have the potential to become a fully awakened Buddha. And that's the main thrust between in being a Mahayana Buddhist, which is of the 2 kinds of Buddhism, that's the one that we practice here. If you split Buddhism, there's 2 main divisions, and one is the Mahayana. And what makes somebody a Mahayana practitioner is just this wish to become fully awakened in order to benefit others. So it's in this verse, when your mothers, well, why do they say mothers? Well, when we get into this topic, you'll see that there's this, the ability to develop this kind of attitude is all based upon having compassion. That's the basic thing that you have to have, is you have to develop compassion, this wish for others not to suffer and to help to alleviate their suffering and the causes of suffering. And to get your mind to feel that way about every sentient being is going against a lot that we have inside of us that's in the way. And so in this particular method, the first step is to see every single being as your kind, as your mother. And so that's why they have that in this verse. So when you're, and we'll get into this, there's too much material here to do in an hour, but I'll give it my best. So when your mothers who've loved you since time without beginning, and that's this sense of the people who nurture you in your life. And if you can think about someone, often it's a mother, it doesn't have to be, but that exemplifies this kind of selflessness that parents often have, which is they'll be sick and taking care of their kids. They can put their own needs aside without even a second thought. It just is there, and this is the kind of attitude that we're trying to develop, where we actually, we can actually care about every being in that kind of way. It's quite a tall order. It's very expansive to think about. So I'd like to read some verses from Shantideva, who I think, more than anyone else, really captures this very poetically, this essence of the altruistic intention. And we have to really see what it is and inspire ourselves in this direction, because it's a pretty big, a pretty tall order of what we're asking ourselves to do. And it goes against the grain of what we're usually doing all day long, which is, trying to be comfortable, trying to be happy. It's just, we're really swimming upstream here to develop this. But when you see what the advantages of this are, then when you really experience some of this, then it actually, I think, will probably become quite easy. I mean, what I think of from this is, I actually, in my own thought, is that the reason this holiness is so heartwarming, and so this appeal that he has, I think, is actually just this. I think that he sees everyone as his kind mother, and has developed this method and this thought to the point where, it's completely inspiring. And so when you see someone who's developed these capacities, and you see how they can move from a joy to a joy, that's the verse that Shantideva that I like so much. You can't really, it's very attractive, and you would desire to do this. And I think that's what we need to do. We have to kind of sell ourselves on this. So sometimes Venerable Children calls these verses the advertisement section or something. I don't know. But for me, they're very compelling. And so I'll just read some of these verses from Shantideva, who says it so well. So in the first chapter of, I think there's about 10 chapters or 10 chapters, I think, in that book. In the first one is a lot of these verses, although not all of them are from that. But he says, just as a flash of lightning on a dark, cloudy night for an instant brightly illuminates all, likewise in this world, through the mind of a Buddha, a wholesome thought rarely and briefly appears. Hence virtue is perpetually feeble, and a great strength of evil is being extremely intense. Except for a fully awakened mind, which is this bodhicitta, what other virtue can overcome it? All the Buddhas who have contemplated for many eons have seen it to be beneficial, for by it the limitless masses of beings will quickly attain the supreme state of bliss. Doesn't that make you a little interested? Those who wish to destroy the many sorrows of their conditioned existence, and those who wish all beings to experience a multitude of joys, and those who wish to experience much happiness, should never forsake the awakening mind, which is another word for this bodhicitta. The moment an awakening mind arises, all in those fettered and weak in the jail of cyclic existence, so all us suffering sentient beings who born and reborn in cyclic existence, once this moment appears where you have this awakening mind, they will be named as a child of the Sugatas, as like a bodhisattva, and will be revered by both humans and gods of the world. It's like the supreme gold-making elixir, for it transformed the unclean body that we have into the priceless jewel of a Buddha form, and therefore firmly seize this awakening mind. And it goes on, talking about clearing away confusion. And this is, I remember one time listening to teachings from His Holiness, and he said this, and the whole group of people just started applauding, because he said something just like this: where is there such a comparable friend? And I think, in a way, if you think about it, all of us need friends. And in a way, at least I'm speaking for myself, friends have been in my life, my younger life, my main refuge. But friends can't really hold up to what you need as a refuge, and bodhicitta can actually. And so that's really something to think about. There's actually something that you can kind of rely on. In the Dharma, this is one thing that side of us that needs this kind of, we need something to hold on to that's reliable. So for those of us who have become Buddhists, we turn to the Dharma for that. And that's what the meaning of refuge is, in a way. And this aspect of it is particularly helpful and can be very helpful to your mind as you go through the meditations. And for me personally, a while ago I realized I needed to heal my mind. And I find that these kind of meditations are the things that actually do that, can help me in that regard, at least in the short term. So, and then there's this one verse later on where he says, so having mounted the horse of an awakening mind that dispels all discouragement and weariness, who, when they know of this mind that proceeds from joy to joy, would ever lapse into despondency? And this is actually, I think, to me, very compelling, because I think it's very true, that if we actually take a hold of our opportunity that we have in this life, when you're really able to do that, you can't have a mind that's despondent. The two don't ever happen at the same time. And so when you have, when you're getting weary or despondent or things like that, you need to have antidotes, things that are reliable that can kind of pull you out of that. And this is where, this is one of the ways to do that, is to recognize potential that we have and our potential capacity and the opportunities and situation that we have right now, and take our mind out of those kind of thoughts that are bringing us down. So, one way to describe bodhicitta, like a definition more, is that it has two intentions. One is to alleviate suffering, and the other is to become a Buddha in order to do that. And when a person has risen to that in a spontaneous manner, is one way it's taught, then you start this process of being a bodhisattva, which has 10 grounds. I think that's right, 10 bhumis, 10 grounds, right? So what really starts you in that is this, but how do you get to that point? Let's go back. What does that really mean? I think something His Holiness wrote I found kind of helpful, because I've always heard that described as when this bodhicitta is spontaneous, meaning that when it's usually what we do is we fabricate this, which is what I'm doing right now. I don't have this capacity yet, but I work on it sitting on the cushion, and you fabricate it, you cultivate it, which is what we want to do, but it will come to a place where it's spontaneous. And what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said about this is, he said, when this double aspiration to help others and to attain enlightenment in order to be of the highest service becomes as strong outside of meditation as it is in meditation, then you've achieved this bodhicitta mind. That's one way he talked about it. So in order for that to happen, there are things that you have to cultivate first, and one of them is this determination to be free, which sometimes we use the word renunciation. And this is really taking a look at our situation in the Buddhist worldview. When you study the teachings that talk about like what the first noble truth and the second noble truth, that there is unsatisfactoriness in our life. Things always just kind of don't measure up. Every day we have this experience one way, shape, or form. And you penetrate those teachings that the Buddha gave and the Four Noble Truths, a person who's practicing this path and has really taken that to heart and cultivated that will get to a point where everything in this samsaric existence will seem kind of like a fire pit or something. It's never going to satisfy, and they're aware of that. They're able to see the suffering and understand it. And it's not just seeing the suffering, but it's also knowing that there's a way to alleviate it. So in the Four Noble Truths, the first two describe the unsatisfactoriness of our lives and that there's a cause. And then the last two are that it can be ceased and there's a path to cease that. And this determination to be free is something that involves not only understanding the first two noble truths, but also understanding the last two. You have to know there's a way out. If there wasn't a way out, as His Holiness says, you might as well just go and get drunk. I mean, really, why not? If there wasn't a way out, why not? But if you see that there is a way out, then you can make effort. And so we have to kind of learn about these things. So once you have that very strong, it gets to the point where it's actually dominating your life. And a person who has that, they are in the situation then where they can actually develop this bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is you're trying to develop a kind of compassion. You'll never be able to get to that kind of compassion unless you understand dukkha, or the Four Noble Truths. Do you see what I'm saying? What suffering are you going to relieve people of? What compassion are you going to develop if you don't understand what the problem is? You won't see that there's an illness at all. So why relieve anybody of it? You have to get to that place. So what I studied put together for this talk is from Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the founder of the tradition that we follow here, although that's kind of true, but we don't really identify so strongly to a tradition. We're just Buddhists, I would say. But he's a great teacher, and we follow his teachings. And he I was kind of stuck. And when I turned to this, I found that, wow, he's really got the places where I'm stuck and able to help me find my way out. And that was quite nice. He's so detailed. So these great teachers like this always find the places where they're stuck, and then they point them out to you. So one of them is in this determination to be free. And so here he reads a verse from Chandakirti who says, "At this point, although you may have a simple determination to be free, you should not be merely satisfied merely with this." And that's kind of, I'd say, where I'm at. If I had this fully developed, my life would look completely different. And so it's really something that dominates your life when it's fully developed. You have to be certain that you're living in all levels of cyclic existence, that this impermanence is like a blazing fire. It's like entering a burning house that we want to escape, or like being in prison, and as soon as you have a chance, you're going to be free. This is the kind of realization that a person who has this developed has. And so, we need to get to that point. Because if it's superficial, and this is what Sharawa says, if you have just a superficial determination to be free, he says, if your ability to see the undesirability of true origins, the causes of cyclic existence, is superficial, then your search for liberation, the cessation of suffering and its origin will be the same. They'll be superficial. And likewise, your desire to attain the path to liberation will be mere words, which is kind of what it is now. It's kind of intellectual still, And thus you will not be able to develop either the compassion that can't bear the suffering of living beings who are in this situation, or the spirit of bodhicitta that instills you with great strength. So your understanding of the Mahayana is also merely intellectual. So then he says, so what's the solution to this? You have to stay with these teachings, practice these teachings that are for this, what we call the medium level, medium capacity practitioner. In our tradition, they break it up into 3 levels of practitioner, depending on what your spiritual motivation is. And these particular ones, the medium ones, are the ones that help us to really see our situation in cyclic existence and want to be free. So that you have to have. And once you have this renunciation, then you can really develop bodhicitta after that, because you understand really what suffering is. So then you're actually going to be able to develop compassion. And that's one verse I read that I guess when I was first working on this, I was kind of trying to heal my mind, I would say, my heart and my mind. And I was feeling a little stuck, and I read this line, and I said, yeah, this is really helpful. It says, thus, enter the Mahayana after you have developed great respect for it, induced by seeing its good qualities from various perspectives. And I think that's my message here, is that we have to really come about this from many angles, I think. I think we're complex beings, and so to expect simple solutions doesn't really work for our mind very well. And that because we are complex beings, we have to come at things from a lot of angles. And in terms of the Buddha's teachings, the more we can understand the different teachings from various aspects, then they all kind of integrate and help to support and kind of firm up these understandings, even intellectual understandings that we're trying to have about what the Buddha has taught. So you can see that a person who has this capacity, who has this bodhicitta, is a person of great capacity. I mean, that's quite something to have that kind of mind. So, so how do you get to that point? Well, one thing, because if you understand, like, there's two, Buddhism has two main schools. One is a group of people who their main objective, they have this renunciation, that's their main motivation, and they want to free themselves from this suffering, which is a very noble and awesome thing to do. And they can go about the teachings that are for that, and unless they get stuck in kind of bliss of meditation, which is their big problem, is mistaking that for freedom, for nirvana, they can go that path. For someone who decides to take the Mahayana path and just think about other people as well, in terms of turning around and saying, wow, look at everybody's stuck. Like, you get, imagine yourself, you have this wish to be free, and then you get to the place where you understand these teachings and you can actually liberate yourself from this, from all your problems. Well, you want to think about turning around and helping others, right? And one thing that Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here is that in order to get to this place of developing bodhicitta, the great risk for someone who's trying to do that is that they'll just turn back and just be satisfied with their own liberation. That's kind of like the risk. So he's always pointing out the risk. The risk for the person for individual liberation was mistaking that they think this bliss of their meditation is this freedom. And that's kind of like the first couple of teachers that the Buddha studied with before he went off on his own. If you know his life story, they had actualized these very amazing states of meditative concentration. But he realized that didn't free him from suffering, so he had to keep going. And that's kind of, that's what they're pointing out there. You can't make that mistake. You have to know what's what. So, but then for a person who decides to do the Mahayana path, where do they get stuck? And why is it that when we do our teachings and we're always saying, we want to do more shamatha, we want to do more concentration, they're always, and our tradition especially is very focused on understanding, a lot of understanding and study before you do a lot of retreat. It's the same in the Sakya, it's like that in the Galupa. You have to know what you're going to meditate on, right? And part of the reason they push that way so much is they want you to really understand the path well. And here, the thing to understand is that in order to develop this bodhicitta, it's not only for other people's benefit. You actually have to realize that you can't accomplish your own purposes. That's the basic point that they're saying. He says, you will not have accomplished your own aims and can only accomplish the purposes of others in a limited way if you don't go this route. Is that making sense? Because there's kind of like two paths you could take as a Buddhist. One is to free yourself, and the other is to this Mahayana, to try to become a fully awakened Buddha. Because the person who reaches nirvana, they aren't a Buddha, they're an arhat. They haven't really gotten rid of all of the obscurations that are on the mind stream. So they're free from samsara. They're not going to have the kind of suffering that we experience. But they aren't a Buddha. The person who becomes a Buddha is a being that gets rid of all of their obscurations and develops all their good qualities completely. And so, if you thought that you were only doing it for someone else, well, it's just, to me it just makes sense. If you only thought you were doing it for others, that might take you so far. But if you realize you have to do it for yourself too, that might take you a little farther. And that's what actually they're saying there. They're saying that you have to realize that as a Mahayana practitioner, that you will only accomplish your own aims fully by becoming a fully enlightened being. So, one thing about these teachings that I think is a place that we want to get to, and I think this can only happen through our own practice. And so what do I mean by that? What is our practice? Our practice, kind of in the Buddhist method, is to listen to teachings, to think about them and contemplate them and discuss them and get to a place where you understand the meaning of the teachings. And so that's the second step. So listen, contemplate, which includes talking and discussing, like our discussion groups and things, and then meditating. Because you have to do all three of those. So when you learn about meditation, this is where the actual changes happen in the mind stream the most. Those are the most firm. You can change your thinking a lot by thought, but you can't necessarily overturn it. A lot of times when you decide something intellectually, you can kind of have that idea one day and you can throw it out the next day because you haven't got it to a point of a realization. But when you make it more firm, even by your own, understanding the meaning of things, you can get quite strong. But then you can get to the point where, where you've really seen something for your own self. Like, say I tell you, this Buddha here is pink. You see it's blue. It's going to be hard for me to convince you it's pink. You've seen it for yourself. Well, that's kind of how having a realization is. You've seen it for yourself. I could tell you all day long this Buddha is pink. You're never going to go for it, right? That's the kind of the difference between having a thought like, I wonder what color that Buddha is, and having a realization, So that's kind of the method. You have to listen, contemplate, and then generate these realizations in the mind stream. So, okay. So how did I get to that? Okay, I love this statement because it's like we want to get ourselves to this point. One who enters this kind of Mahayana teachings will get to a place where they say, wonderful, I've found what I'm looking for. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And when you can get these teachings to work, when you actually, spend enough time in meditation and use the teachings, and they help you to, heal your mind and have more peace and, be able to function better in the world and all the benefits that we get from this. This is how you get to this place. And especially when you understand that what these verses that Shantideva said, I guess I forgot to read some of those. The ones where, how can I fathom the depths of the goodness of this jewel of the mind, this bodhicitta, the panacea that relieves the world of pain and is the source of all its joy. That's why the Buddha said this is the essence of his teachings, because this is, if you imbue your mind with bodhicitta, you will follow this path to the end. And so, that's a good thing to know, right? And what he's saying is that this is the source of alleviation of every suffering. And so when I look at that in my own experience, I think of the one single time in my life where I really cultivated over a long period of time the wish to help another person. And even though I failed, I have a lasting, strong experience that this was one of the most beneficial things I ever did. And to me, it reminds me, this is you have to find in your own, for me, this is how it works. I try to find in my own experience, what in the heck could they be talking about here? What could there be in this world of experience that is anything like this bodhicitta that I've experienced? And I can think, well, one time I tried to adopt my nephew, and I put a lot of effort into this over many months, preparing myself. I even went to a therapist to clarify my motivations. And I went through a lot with this, and I really could see in myself that I was really trying to help another being. And this didn't end up so helpful, but I don't think it harmed. So, okay, we broke even. But when I think of that experience, I think I just know how it felt inside, and there's something in there that was so crystal clear. And I can think, yeah, this would be moving from a joy to a joy. This could be, like when you think of how those moments where you can set yourself aside completely and you just do something because it's the right thing to do, or whatever it is, you have to find in your own experience. I don't have bodhicitta, but I have to have something to hang, in my experience, to hang these teachings on, or else it just seems like a science fiction to me. So anyway, yeah, when I came to that line, I said, yeah, wonderful, I've found what I'm looking for. And I don't have that strongly, but I have a little bit of that. At least I resonate with the words. Okay. And then, now Lama Tsongkhapa is giving us some advice not to go wrong. He says, hence, it is a clear indication that you have very little familiarity with the teachings when, after you have taken the spirit of enlightenment, this bodhicitta, to be the crucial instruction, you do not practice it. But after recalling it at the beginning of a session only in words, you intently make great effort at some single small portion of the path. Now all of us who are here are laughing because we all get interested in certain parts of the path. And we're just kind of like, boom, I'm going to do that. And we get into it, and we're like, I want to study this. And then we, of course, every session we generate this bodhicitta motivation with our mere words. But Lama Tsongkhapa is like pointing out, yo, this is not the way to go. You have to do these meditations. And when you do them, So basically in Buddhism, in the Mahayana Buddhism, there's kind of two main aspects. There's the method side of the path and the wisdom side. And this method side is kind of like the bodhicitta, and the wisdom side are the emptiness teachings that you need in order to develop the wisdom that frees you. That's like the wisdom is kind of like the tool. When you have this wisdom realizing emptiness, it's not like, I always thought it was like, boom, you're done. It's not like that. Actually, it's not like that at all. Once you've realized emptiness directly, actually now you have a tool, and then you use it and you cleanse everything. It's like now you've got the cleanser for all your sinks, and now you've got to go and clean all the sinks. You don't, just because you have the cleanser doesn't mean you've cleaned the sinks. So that was a revelation to me. I always thought it was a little quicker than that. I thought it was, poof, you're enlightened. No, that's not right. Okay, so what else is helpful in here? Okay, and then the other thing that's important to realize about bodhicitta is this is the supreme instruction. You're extracting the quintessence of the scriptures, this teaching. And, I don't usually think of it that way, I have to say. I kind of just, I guess because emptiness is so hard to understand that we focus sometimes on different things. And for me lately, it's been trying to understand these philosophical teachings. And I kind of, I realized even that Venerable Chögyam told me years ago, you should always keep 3 parts of your practice very alive and going. And it's the 3 principal aspects of the path. You should always be working on renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom. And I think for myself, I kind of just got away from, I think I was working on 2 of the 3, and I realized, wow, if I do these meditations more, I can heal myself. So I feel a little more motivation than I've had. And then reading this, I realized, wow, I'm making this mistake, I'm making this mistake. And even with the method, there I see, oh, I didn't realize that. And that's some of the things that I'd like to talk about. So I think that maybe people have a little bit of understanding what bodhicitta is now. A little? Okay. then there's all these causes and conditions that I'd never heard about, which I won't have time to go into. And maybe someday we'll give this talk again just for the community. We'll need 2 hours or more. But I can list one of them quickly. There are some conditions that you have to have, but the causes that I thought were quick: a perfect lineage, being sustained by a teacher, compassion towards living beings, and not being disheartened by the difficulties of cyclic existence. You have to have those 4. And then there's 4 strengths that you develop. One is the strength of yourself, the strength of others, people that kind of help you, the strength of the cause, and then the strength of application. And basically the whole point of that was, that section of this teaching was, there are these strengths that help you to develop bodhicitta, but what it comes down to is, one of the main ones is your own strength. Other people can help you, but it's only you who can change your mind. And so, although we need the help of others to cultivate, you just don't learn how to fly a jet without help, or drive a car without help. Everything we do, we have teachers. But when it comes down to it, you have to kind of cultivate. You can only cultivate bodhicitta with your own strength in there. And then there's a whole talk about compassion. And so let's back up here a little bit. Let me list first these. In this chapter, she talks about the 7-point cause and effect training. It has different instructions. Yeah, instructions. Sometimes it's called method instructions. Yeah, it has different titles. 7-point cause and effect personal instructions. And these came from Atisha. So this spirit of awakening, that is like the result of this 7 points. And that arises from having this wholehearted resolve. And that's this idea that I will do this. You just resolve that I will do this, I, myself alone. That comes about from having compassion. Compassion comes about from having love, which is this wanting others to have happiness and the causes of happiness. That comes about in this method from the wish to repay the kindness of your mother or those who have been so kind to you. And that comes about by recollecting their kindness, and that comes about by recognizing all beings as your mothers. And so what underlies this whole thing is compassion. Compassion is involved. You will never. It's what underlies everything that we do in the method aspect of the path. It's important in the beginning, it's important in the middle, and it's important in the end. So in the beginning, it's important because you will make the commitment to free all living beings. And if you don't have great compassion, that's the definition essentially of great compassion. Compassion alone is something that, this is one thing I learned in this. I realized, well, actually I have focused a lot on compassion in my practice, but I haven't done some of these other steps. Because actually what was happening for me was I was trying to work with my mind, and I was feeling kind of stuck. And I actually even listed out all these qualms that I had that were, it was like, what I didn't really ever do was think about great compassion. I think about compassion, but that alone isn't enough. You have to get to the point of this great compassion. So it's pretty easy to develop compassion for people that you care about and things like that. And that is wonderful, but that's not going to take you to bodhicitta. You have to actually develop great compassion. It's actually great compassion that is the compassion that underlies all the method side of the path. All of the 6 perfections, they're based on this great compassion. I didn't realize that, and I didn't focus on that enough. And so not wanting people to suffer, when you see people suffering, and you recognize their suffering, it's pretty easy to have compassion. What's a little harder is when it's people that you don't really care for, or people that you don't know, that you're indifferent to, and things like that, which is why we did the meditation today on how we see people as friends, difficult people, or strangers, and why we label them that, and how we need to get to this place of equanimity where we can see all of them in the same light. And then, in order to have great compassion, you have to be able to do that, which is why they take you back to this point of seeing every being as your mother. And that was the other part of this that I really didn't grok before, the importance of that piece. And so that's, what I've kind of played around with in my meditation. It's been very beneficial for my mind. And I think for people, like many of us don't have the Buddhist worldview. We didn't grow up with it. We don't necessarily believe in rebirth. But my advice would be, if you want to practice this method, which I think is quite helpful, I don't think you have to be a Buddhist to do this method and have it be beneficial for you. I think if you just have a motivation to want to be able to be more kind to everyone you meet, this would probably be beneficial to work on this method. So then if you get hung up with the part about rebirth, just don't worry about it. I mean, just take it like this. Just set it aside. That's what I do with these things until I can understand them. I just set them aside. That's what Venerable instructed me to do, and it's been very helpful. So say you want to see all sentient beings as your mother, because you have some motivation to be able to look upon beings with affection and compassion and not have your mind riddled with anger all the time. I mean, that's a pretty nice motivation right there. Well, just do it as an experiment. You don't have to believe in rebirth. Just take it on as an experiment. Like, well, I'm just going to do it. I don't have to believe in it. And see what the effect on your mind is of like really going through these meditations. They're described in a few short pages in this book called Becoming Enlightened. It goes through this 7-point cause and effect instructions. And then it's explained in detail in this book. The whole book is about this. It's called Expanding Your Love. And these are very inexpensive books. I think you can get them for like $5. They're both, so Becoming Enlightened by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and How to Expand Love. And they talk you through this method, and then you spend time with it. And you can see what happens when you can get to the place first, where you see all beings as your mother, even if you're just doing it in meditation. It's really, then the way they lead you through it, this practice, you can actually make your mind softer. These things that are so hard, everything gets softer in there, and so it's quite nice. And then, when you think of anyone who's nurtured you, and then, that's the second step. You see how your mother or someone who's nurtured you has benefited you. When you really let that seep into you, wanting to repay their kindness comes naturally. Yeah, they say you don't have to work on that. But then in this book, and when I was reading about it, His Holiness was kind of talking about, I don't know, maybe people that I would label like bullies or something, like people who actually have difficulty with this. I'd never really read that before. And my take on it was, I think if you really are able to let in your heart that someone has nurtured you and been of benefit to you, and you can really feel that, then I think automatically this wish to repay is there. I think the times where that doesn't happen for me, I don't think I've really let in the kindness of another person. I've maybe said to myself, oh, they were so helpful, or they were this, or they were that, but I haven't really felt it, And so I think that, it seems like that wish to repay the kindness, which is the third step, comes naturally. So the first step was recognizing all beings as your mothers, and they have contemplations you do on that. And it's very important to try to apply that to everyone, and I think quite beneficial to the mind. And then reflecting their kindness, and then this wish to repay comes, and then this feeling of love. And there, the kind of love they're talking about is heartfelt affection. And that's, that makes your mind very soft. And it's like, when you're trying to grow carrots, if you don't prepare the soil right, it's really hard to grow carrots. And even if you get it partially prepared, they grow and they split into two. And I don't know if you guys garden, but if you don't prepare the soil, it's hard to get plants to grow. You have to work the soil. And it's the same with our mind. You know how they say a mind of anger cannot have a mind of love. These things don't happen at the same time. So when you're sick of being miserable from having anger and you want to learn how to cultivate love, you can feel this in your mind, that the mind gets softer. And then when you do these meditations, then you get to the place where you actually think about people who are, that you had in that enemy category, difficult people, and your mind is softer. You're able to see wider, because a mind that's angry is very narrow, right? it sees things in a very diluted way, in a very narrow way, and it can't see the whole picture. It's like looking through a straw at something, you know. Whereas when you don't have anger in the mind is very broad, and you can see, you know, all more like all the causes and conditions and all the factors that go into, you know, the occurrence of something. Versus when your mind gets angry, it says, "They're a jerk. They did that." It's very narrow. And when it's very broad, then, you know, you can see so much clearer. So this mind that has love is a mind that's very soft, and it sets the condition because you care. You genuinely have affection for somebody. You genuinely care about them. And you can, you know, it's possible to do that. Okay. Okay, so Kamalashila said about that, moistened by love, your mind becomes friable, fertile soil. And when you plant the seed of compassion, it will grow easily and bountifully. Therefore, after you infuse your mind with love, cultivate compassion. So then you go on to the next step. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, understand this to be an extremely important point. Meaning, you need to get your mind to that point. You know, you can't just, you know, oh yeah, I love them and move on. You know, you have to actually have that. Okay. Okay. So then, with this feeling of love, usually, those of you who have done some of the practices with us, especially in the Chinrazi practice, we have this extended prayer of the four immeasurables. And this is kind of this attitude of love that we have to have. We want to bring it up to these different points. So see what these feel like in your mind. And here it goes like, wouldn't it be nice if everybody was happy? It's kind of like, wouldn't it be nice if we built a building? I want them to be happy. I want to build a building. I want to build a building. And then it's, I'm going to do whatever I can to make this person happy. I'm going to build a building. You know, it's, you can feel the difference. Wouldn't it be nice to go on a trip? Hey, let's go. I'm going to go do everything I can to make this happen. See the three different levels of involvement? It's like, wouldn't it be nice if everybody had happiness and the causes of happiness? Yeah, that'd be nice. Are you going to do anything about it with that? If it's convenient. You haven't really made a decision yet, right? Okay, may they be happy. Right? Well, there's a little more, yeah, may they be happy. I really want them to be happy. It's not like just a passing thought. And then this next level is getting like personally involved. That's what we want to try to do in our meditations. We do this on the cushion. This is an important thing to separate out. You might not know how to help somebody, but you won't help them at all if you can't get your mind to a place of wanting to help. So to me, this has been very important. Venerable Chodron has taught me this. Don't get a plan going of how you're going to help somebody at first. First, get your mind in the right place. So for me, what usually happens is something comes up and I kind of like, it comes up and I go right to what's planned. What's the plan here? And then things go how they go, but not always so well if it's a complicated, difficult situation. What would be better was better for me is to do this intermediate step of like, well, how can I get my mind to a place where I can be helpful in a difficult situation? I mean, we all face difficult situations. So if you just go in and try to fix the situation, sometimes they go well and sometimes they're disasters, right? But if you actually go into a situation where you've actually really clarified your motivations first and try to get your mind to a place of really wanting to be of benefit, you know, I mean, it's a whole different thing. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say here is we're doing this on the cushion at this point. We're getting our mind, our attitude, the attitude adjustment in our meditation, so that then when we get off the cushion, we can enter into things in a way that will be more beneficial. So that's an important point. So the power of love is quite palpable. It's the supreme protector. And that's how the Buddha, they say, defeated, when he became enlightened. One version of that is when these evil forces or Maras came at him, he defeated them with the power of love. That's pretty powerful. So then from love, you move on to compassion. And actually, I forgot to say in the love one, this is kind of an important point. When you're going to do this, it's explained who do you do it with. And first, you want to start, when you do these meditations, you start with people that you have some, like a friendly feeling towards. Then people who are neutral. Then people who are difficult. And you work your way slowly through those three, and then you think about all beings. In these meditations, we're trying to get to the place where we have this bodhicitta, wanting to become enlightened to benefit all beings. All beings. But if you do the meditation like that, like may all beings be happy, what will happen is it will be the same as nobody, because when you come out of it and you try to do something, you actually haven't gotten yourself very far. And this is even a point that Lama Tsongkhapa makes. You have to work with specific people. And Jeffrey Hopkins, when he edited this book, does it so well. And you just go through your life and you think of people. And you do this first with people that are friends, then with people that are neutral. And you spend time with these things. And once you can get that same feeling towards a neutral person, then you move on to difficult people. And once you can get that feeling with difficult people, then you move on to all beings. So then when you get off the cushion, it's really a different experience. Because you can say, may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. But if you haven't worked through some of the difficulties in your mind with these different groups of people, you haven't really kind of done the work yet. So then when you move on to compassion, they kind of change the order of that a little bit, because you don't start with, they have you start with people who are neutral, because it's actually easier in some ways to start with people who are neutral. So, okay, where are we? Compassion. So when we do these, we have to get to a place where we've had some kind of transformational experience in our meditation. And then you have to sustain it. I think those are the kind of the most salient points. Okay, I think I might have said that wrong. Yeah, I think I did. Sorry. For compassion, it says start with friends, then neutral, then enemies. One of these is different. Love is friends, neutral, and enemies. One of these is the other. Sorry. I think I might have said that wrong. Okay. So when is the measure of having developed this compassion? When you spontaneously feel compassion, which has the subjective wish to completely eliminate the suffering of all beings, just like a mother's wish to remove her dear child's unhappiness, then your compassion is complete and therefore called great compassion. So they still take this back to this kind of thing that I think is something that we can kind of understand and latch onto, is this kind of the parents not wanting their child to suffer. That kind of level, which is, I think, a little easier for us to understand. We want to try to have that for everyone. That's the measure of it. And then from there, having developed this compassion, then you have to take another step, and you have to say, you have to really see that all beings are suffering, and it's like this needless suffering. And because you've got this renunciation going, and that includes, you understand there's a way out of this, and now you've got this bodhicitta going, you're working on that, and you have compassion for every being, you have to actually understand that there's a way out, and that this suffering is needless, and be willing to take this on yourself. It's like taking on this great level of responsibility. How can I provide them happiness and free them from suffering? That's what you want to get to. So you take on this responsibility. And this is why His Holiness says this verse, for as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide, to dispel the misery of the world. I don't know where you ever see His Holiness and not see that verse. This is the one verse that I associate with him more. I mean, it's from Shantideva, but this is what this does. This is the verse that is talking about this great resolve. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide, and dispel the misery of the world. And then, in this portion of the text, and this was helpful for my mind, because I think what I was coming up against with in this is we have to realize that since beginningless time, our minds have had afflictions and negativities, and in the mind, and so we can't just do this a little bit and expect that we're going to be able to boom come out the other end, with this bodhicitta. They said, one great master said, since beginningless time, the tree of the mind has been moistened with the bitter juice of the afflictions, and you are unable to sweeten its taste. How could a drop of water of good qualities affect it? And so there was this kind of tree, a very bitter tree with a big trunk, and someone put just one drop of sugar cane on it. Well, what's it going to do? This huge, massive tree that's quite bitter, and when you put one drop of sugar cane on it, it's not going to make it a sweet tree. And that's kind of our situation. One time, Geshe Tekchok talked to us about purification. It's a practice that we do here a lot, where we help to work with our minds and remove things that are going to ripen in our suffering, past karmas, past actions we've done, and working with our afflictions, these negative states of mind. And he compared it kind of like to, I always think of Mount Rainier. When you do purification, you're kind of like taking a little backhoe and going up to Mount Rainier and lifting like one load of dirt off the mountain. And that's kind of our situation. Since beginningless time, we have had afflictions in our mind. So when we try to do these meditations, and then we walk out the door and boom, we get angry at somebody, it's like, it can be very disheartening. And so I think you have to be able to put these practices in perspective and realize that, from the Buddhist perspective, since beginningless time, we've had afflictions. They're not a part of the mind. They're not like, they talk about it like water, the mind being like this clear water, and you just dump afflictions in it and you can separate them out, or like the clouds in the sky. The sky is clear, but the clouds obscure it. The afflictions obscure our mind, but they're not part of the mind. And so they can be removed. And so, but we have afflictions, and so these practices they just don't roll over. When you have to make effort over a long period of time, and it's important to know that so you don't get discouraged. But over time, and this is, we're talking years. I think maybe they often say, look back 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, in terms of trying to, like rewiring the hard drive kind of thing, so it doesn't happen overnight. So I think that helps us to be realistic. So I think that's. So then the last step is then you realize, okay, now you have this great resolve, is that, well, how am I going to do this? You realize you can hardly help yourself. So you need to become a fully awakened Buddha, where you've developed your good qualities to their full potential, and you've gotten rid of any, all your afflictions, anything that's going to get in the way of being able to be of benefit to others. And so one piece in here that was also, I never knew this, and it's actually, you can't actually develop bodhicitta, it said, without actually having studied the qualities of the Buddha. You really have to focus on that. It says, so once you have been inspired in this whole process, and you see the need to attain enlightenment for the sake of others, you may wish to develop it. But that's not enough. First, you have to increase your faith as much as possible by contemplating the good qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and the enlightened activities, in which is what they talk about in the chapters on going for refuges, where this is explained in our teachings. And then, as it is taught that faith is the basis of aspiration, develop the desire to attain these good qualities from the depth of your heart, and induce a certainty that it's absolutely necessary to obtain omniscience, even for your own welfare. So that was kind of a surprise to me, and I think a very important point. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. In order to want to become a Buddha, you have to know what a Buddha is. You know, what are the qualities of a Buddha? What are you trying to develop and generate this kind of faith? It is true that it's faith that leads to aspiration. Aspiration is based on some kind of knowledge that you have. You aspire to something because you know something about it. So we have to spend time with those teachings. So we'll just close with a verse from Atisha, who is the person who has described this method. He says, one who wishes to enter the door of the Mahayana teachings should develop, through effort over eons, the spirit of enlightenment, which is like the sun that clears away darkness and the moon that quells the torment of heat. So does anyone have any questions? Not sure I could answer them, but a little bit over time, but yeah. Cyclic existence. In Buddhism, we have this concept of beginningless time, and that through beginningless time, we've taken birth again and again and again. And unfortunately, we're in, because we have afflictions, and out of those afflictions we do actions and create, which is karma, that we cycle in again and again, lifetime after lifetime, born and reborn again and again. We don't remember our previous lives because of the transition between the lives, they say. Although I think some people do, but most of us don't. So we, life after life, we're born in this cycle that repeats and repeats and repeats. And so then the Buddha taught what are the causes of that? The 12 links. It's on that painting in the back is a pictorial representation of how we got in this situation, and then you go the reverse direction for how you get out. So it's kind of like an expanded teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So cyclic existence, sometimes people think of it as a place. I did for a long time, but it's not the world. It's not a place. It's actually our body, under the control. Your mind stream goes on life after life, and it takes a new form. Well, I wouldn't use the word soul, because in the Buddhist philosophy that denotes something that is permanent and partless and things like that, and unitary. And we have this idea that there's our mind stream isn't like, it's like changing moment by moment, every moment changing. There's not some thing there that exactly. So how would you say to say it's just the mind stream would be kind of confusing, but it is the mind stream that moves from life to life. Yeah, continuity of consciousness. But does that help? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes a while.
The more you learn, the more you talk.
Yeah.
Questions.
Yeah, this is good. It's good to ask questions. Yeah.
Can you outline great compassion as opposed to compassion?
Yeah, compassion, that's okay. Yeah, compassion is the wish for others not to suffer, to be free from suffering and its causes. But great compassion is wishing that for every being. And that's quite a different thing, because, it's not so hard to have compassion in certain situations, but it's very difficult to have compassion in other situations. But if you had great compassion, you'd have it in every situation, because you would want it for all beings. And so how in the heck are you going to get that? That's why Atisha greeted everyone with Mother. Every sentient being that Atisha saw, hello, Mother. It was like a mind training, and for him, I think it held this, kind of the way you see His Holiness. Everyone His Holiness greets is greeting with this feeling of affection, I feel.
His dear ones.
Yeah, His dear ones. Right, right. And so if you felt that way about everyone, then, it would be easier to have compassion. And then, so that's the difference. It's for every being. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we'll just sit for a moment, and then what you want to do, because it's late, is just try to think of 1 or 2 things that you want to take from this talk, and then we'll say some dedication prayers, and then we'll go and have a potluck. So and get a little warmer.